That's a condom on your
Well,
hand.
you can't be too careful with some of the wankers you meet nowadays.
What happens when the laughter fades, and the family that built an empire on chaos begins to crumble from within? From the moment it crashed onto the airwaves in 2011, Mrs. Brown's Boys was a force of nature raw, raucous, and utterly impossible to ignore. At its heart was Fiona O'Carroll's creation, a sharp-tongued Dublin matriarch who spun the messiness of family life into pure comedic gold, enchanting millions throughout the UK and Ireland. But beneath the surface of the on-screen chaos, a different kind of drama was unfolding. Key figures began to disappear from the fold, some slipping away into the night, others leaving in a storm of controversy. Was it a question of contracts, a clash of creative wills, or were the cracks forming from something deeper, something far more personal? Today, we pull back the curtain on the real stories, behind why these actors walked away from a phenomenon, and how their departures would irrevocably alter the very soul of Mrs. Brown's Boys. Long before it became a titan of BBC comedy, the story of Mrs. Brown's Boys began in the modest, dimly lit theaters of Ireland in the early 1990s. It was there that a comedian fighting for his big break, Fiona O'Carroll, conjured a character from the fabric of his own past. Agnes Brown, a Dublin matriarch with a sailor's tongue and a heart of gold, modeled after the formidable women of his youth. But fate had a strange design. The role of Agnes was never intended for him. When the actress cast for the part failed to appear one fateful night, O'Carroll, in a moment of sheer desperation, pulled on a wig and stepped into the light himself. The response was electric. In that instant, Mrs. Brown was truly born. The stage performances that followed were a beautiful, chaotic symphony of improvisation, noise, and sheer unpredictability, defined by broken lines, missed cues, and a direct, unfiltered connection with the audience. A loyal, almost cult-like following began to form, particularly within working-class communities. Irish and British audiences recognized in the chaos a mirror of their own lives, only amplified, more disorderly, and always with a drink close at hand. Nearly 2 decades would pass before the phenomenon finally reached the screen. In 2011, Mrs. Brown's Boys premiered on BBC One, carrying with it the raw, unpolished charm of its theatrical roots. The live audience, the on-screen mistakes, the winks to the camera, it was all there. Critics were merciless, branding it archaic and vulgar. But the public was enthralled. You see, Fiona O'Carroll hadn't just created a character, he had built an institution, a family, on-screen and off. His wife, Jennifer Gibney, embodied the role of Kathy. His own son, Danny, became Dermot. His daughter, Fiona, played Maria. His sister, Eilis, was the beloved neighbor, Winnie. This genuine bond infused the show with a palpable warmth, an undeniable authenticity, but it was a closeness that could, at times, breed tension behind the curtain. Before long, Mrs. Brown's Boys had transformed into a global brand. Sold-out arenas, holiday specials that became national events, books, merchandise, even a feature film in 2014 that, while dismissed by critics, drew audiences in droves. Fiona O'Carroll had taken a simple stage act and forged it into a comedy empire. But with great success comes great pressure, and as the empire grew, fractures began to appear. One by one, loyal members of the cast started to drift away, some into silence, others into the spotlight of controversy. Love it or loathe it, Mrs. Brown's Boys stands as a cultural monument, boisterous, unapologetic, and fiercely resistant to the modern age. What began as a desperate, last-minute improvisation on a forgotten stage had become one of Britain's most lasting comedic legacies. Yet, just out of frame, behind the laughter, the currents of change were already beginning to stir. And one of the first tremors to shake the foundation involved Fiona O'Carroll, the actress behind Maria Brown. Her departure sent shockwaves through the loyal fanbase. On screen, Fiona was Maria Brown, Agnes's steadfast, strong-willed daughter-in-law, the ever-patient wife of Dermot. But Fiona's role extended far beyond the script. She wasn't just another actor. She was Fiona O'Carroll's daughter, blood. She had been there since the very beginning, from the humble stage productions of the 90s, all the way to its primetime reign on the BBC. It was Fiona who molded Maria into one of the show's essential anchors, a voice of reason in the madness, which is why the news that broke in 2022, the news that she would not be part of the upcoming live tour, left the show's followers utterly stunned. To truly grasp the weight of her exit, one must understand the depth of the roots that tied Fiona to this world. Because Mrs. Brown's Boys was never merely a television program, it was a family legacy. Fiona had come of age inside of it, long before the blinding lights of television fame, long before the sold-out arenas across the globe. She embodied Maria in those early, chaotic days, a time when scripts were merely suggestions, and the humor was unfiltered, almost dangerously alive. Through the years, Maria transformed from a quiet observer on the fringe of the Brown family circus into its very core, the steady hand, the calm in the eye of the storm, a whisper of reason against a chorus of absurdity. But after more than a decade, the curtain fell on one chapter, and Fiona found herself standing at a profound personal crossroads. "I felt like I was living someone else's story," she would later confess. "I needed to write my own." This wasn't merely an exit from a role. It was a pilgrimage to find herself. A mother in her 40s, she came to a quiet realization that the character she had inhabited for so long no longer fit. It was a costume that had grown too tight. The whispers began almost immediately. Fans, hungry for drama, speculated about tensions brewing in the shadows, a narrative made all the more compelling by one simple fact. The show's creator was her father. But Fiona moved swiftly to quiet the storm, insisting there was no family fallout. "I'm still as close to Brendan as ever," she stated, drawing a firm line between fiction and family. Brendan echoed the sentiment, his pride palpable. "She's my daughter first, not just Maria," he affirmed. But for the legions of fans, her absence left a void that could not be so easily explained away. Maria Brown was never the loudest voice in the room, but she was the show's heartbeat, the emotional anchor for Dermot, the quiet counterweight to Agnes's magnificent madness, and the reflection of the audience itself. Without her, Mrs. Brown's Boys seemed to drift from its moorings, becoming a little more unhinged, a little less tethered to the ground. Fiona's choice wasn't just a casting change, it was a seismic shift in the show's very foundation. The series had always been a testament to family and loyalty, but her departure was a stark reminder that even in the tightest-knit circles, change is the only constant. Her story resonated beyond the screen, sparking conversations about self-preservation, burnout, and the courage it takes to walk away from something you love. Since her exit, Fiona has retreated from the glare of the spotlight, choosing the quiet rhythm of family life over the applause of the crowd. And while the door to acting remains ajar, her compass now points in a different direction, guiding her toward priorities far from the stage, even as she makes rare appearances for interviews or speaking engagements. She carries no regrets. In leaving, she didn't lose a part of herself. She found a new, more profound sense of balance. Fiona may no longer walk the set as Maria, but her shadow lingers, a permanent part of the show's soul. But not all departures are so quiet. Enter Gary Hollywood. The story of Gary Hollywood's exit is etched in controversy, a stark contrast to the laughter he brought to the screen. He was Dino Doyle, the flamboyant, razor-witted hairdresser, Rory's other half, a whirlwind of style and infectious charm from the very beginning. Dino wasn't just a character, he was an institution, a fan favorite who brought a unique flair to the Brown family's chaos. But in the year 2020, the laughter stopped. There was no farewell tour, no tearful final episode. He simply vanished. When the eagerly awaited Christmas and New Year's specials aired, Dino Doyle was nowhere to be seen. A void was left, and into that silence, fans poured their confusion and theories. The answer, when it finally came from Gary himself, was as old as show business itself, a dispute over pay. He claimed that he and Damian McKiernan, the actor who had stepped into the role of Rory Brown, were being compensated at a dramatically lower rate than their fellow cast members for the 2020 holiday specials. According to Gary, when he voiced his concerns, the response was not a negotiation, but an exclusion. He was, in his own words, written out of the future, a stunning blow after more than a decade of unwavering loyalty. What hurt the most, he would later say, was the profound sense of betrayal. This wasn't just a job, it was a production that had always, he believed, championed itself as a family. The private hurt soon exploded into a public war. The dispute escalated, culminating in a lawsuit filed against Fiona O'Carroll and the show's producers over allegations of unfair dismissal. The legal proceedings became front-page news, a bitter drama that sliced through the fan base, with claims of discrimination and a battle over equal pay dividing loyalties across Ireland and the UK. On one side, there were those who stood with Gary, seeing a trusted actor cast aside. On the other, defenders of Brendan, who saw a complex business decision, perhaps a simple misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But regardless of where one's sympathies lay, one thing was certain: the carefully crafted image of a happy, close-knit television family had been irrevocably shattered. In the face of these claims, Brendan O'Carroll denied the allegations, framing the entire affair as a misunderstanding he had attempted to resolve quietly behind closed doors. But the battle lines had been drawn, and with legal filings and escalating media scrutiny, the private dispute had become a public spectacle. It became hauntingly clear that Gary was not coming back. Dino's absence carved a hollow space in the narrative. A character once so central to the action simply vanished, without a word, without a trace. For the show's devoted followers, this was more than a simple casting change. It was the erasure of a singular presence, a vibrant soul who infused the series with a unique energy. Gary, for his part, has remained largely silent on the matter, though whispers of his disappointment have surfaced. He has since returned to the stage, but the doors to Mrs. Brown's Boys remain closed. Yet, for so many, Gary will forever be Dino, the flamboyant, self-assured hairdresser who set the screen ablaze. His departure left a void that has never quite been filled, and though the show continues, a lingering feeling remains that something or someone is irrevocably gone. Then, there was Rory Cowan. His exit from Mrs. Brown's Boys in 2017 sent shockwaves through the fandom. He was never just another actor on the call sheet. He was the very heart and soul of the series, defined by an electric energy, a razor-sharp wit, and an unforgettable sense of style. The character of Rory became an icon almost overnight. His interplay with Agnes, that palpable chemistry with Brendan O'Carroll himself, felt utterly irreplaceable. Rory's journey with the Brown family began long before the television cameras ever started rolling, originating as Brendan's publicist during the early stage productions. In time, Brendan saw something more, offering him the role of Rory Brown, a part that was initially intended to be fleeting. But Rory's innate talent was undeniable, captivating audiences and cementing his place as an indispensable member of the ensemble. So when he walked away from the live tour in 2017, a single question echoed among the fans: why? The answer, as it would be revealed, was profoundly personal. Behind the scenes, Rory was navigating the immense pressure of a grueling tour and filming schedule, while serving as the primary caregiver for his aging mother. In the quiet aftermath of her passing, Rory found himself emotionally adrift, recognizing that a chapter of his life needed to close. "I was sad on the show. I didn't enjoy it. I needed to go," he would later confess. His decision was never born from a lack of love for his castmates or the audience. It was an act of self-preservation. The joy that once fueled his performance had been eclipsed by grief and exhaustion. His departure was a quiet, personal choice, a necessary step back into the shadows, for the sake of his own well-being. And while the reasons were understood, the reality was a difficult pill for fans to swallow. The role was eventually recast, with Damien McGinn stepping in, but the transition was far from seamless. The new dynamic simply lacked the familiar alchemy, that perfect comedic rhythm that audiences had cherished for years. Rory, however, did not fade from the limelight. In 2019, he re-emerged, joining the cast of Fair City, and revealed a new dimension to his craft, showcasing his dramatic range. He also penned a memoir, Mrs. Cowan's Boy, a reflection on his life, his career, and his unforgettable time with Mrs. Brown's Boys. And though the wig and heels may be retired, his indelible portrayal of Rory Brown remains etched in the annals of the show as one of its most cherished figures. To the fans, he was a beacon of joy. To the show itself, he was a cornerstone. His legacy will forever be remembered as one of its most brilliant highlights. Which brings us to Jennifer Gibney. As Kathy Brown, Agnes's whip-smart, modern, and often overlooked daughter, Gibney, has been a fixture of Mrs. Brown's Boys since its very inception. Her position within the show is singular, not merely for the character she plays, but for the fact that she is married to its creator, Brendan O'Carroll. This real-life connection always lent an intriguing layer of charm to the on-screen mother-daughter dynamic between Kathy and Agnes, a subtle wink to the audience who knew they were husband and wife off-camera. But as the seasons wore on, keen-eyed fans began to notice a peculiar shift. Kathy's presence began to diminish. She had always been the ensemble's anchor, the calm, career-focused counterweight to the swirling chaos of the Brown family. Yet, by the mid-2000s, her appearances grew more infrequent, her scenes noticeably shorter, her role in the narrative shrinking to little more than a cameo. A question began to form in the minds of the viewers. Was Kathy being slowly written out? Or was there a deeper story, a tension brewing just behind the curtain? Whispers circulated, a narrative suggesting Brendan was methodically phasing out his own wife's character, a story that seemed ripe with drama. But the truth, as it so often is, was far more grounded in reality. Jennifer would later explain that her reduced presence was a mutual, creative decision made with Brendan. There was no explosive argument, no bitter fallout. It was a strategic choice to enrich the storylines of other characters, like Buster, Winnie, or Grandad. Both Brendan and Jennifer came to feel that Kathy's character arc had reached its natural conclusion. She had always been the voice of reason, but after several seasons, the challenge of finding fresh, compelling angles for her became immense. It was better than forcing her into the spotlight. They agreed to transition her into a more supporting role. And though Kathy was never formally written out of the script, her absence was a palpable void. As the show's more grounded characters dwindled, its tone shifted, leaning ever more into pure slapstick and heightened absurdity. Whether this evolution was an improvement is a debate that still rages among fans, but one thing remains clear: Kathy's departure left a noticeable vacancy. Then came the story of Damian McKiernan. When Rory Cowan departed from Mrs. Brown's Boys in 2017, it signified more than a mere cast change. It was a definitive turning point for the series. Cowan had been a fixture of the show for decades, adored for his flamboyant charm and razor-sharp comic timing. So, when Damian McKiernan, a former Mr. Ireland with limited acting experience, was announced as his replacement, the weight of expectation was astronomical. Damian's interpretation of Rory Brown was profoundly different, softer, more subdued, and more grounded than Cowan's vibrant, expressive performance. The shift was immediately apparent to the audience. While some viewers eventually warmed to his portrayal, others found the adjustment difficult, feeling the iconic chemistry between Brendan O'Carroll's Agnes and the new Rory was fundamentally altered. Still, Damian committed himself completely, appearing in Christmas specials and on grueling live tours for several years. He remained a consummate professional, a steady presence even as whispers of behind-the-scenes tension began to circulate. By 2020, his conspicuous absence from promotional materials fueled a storm of rumors that he had exited over the very same pay dispute that had prompted Gary Hollywood's departure. Both men had allegedly discovered significant pay discrepancies when compared to other members of the cast, and when they voiced their concerns, the atmosphere reportedly soured. There was no official announcement, no televised farewell. Damian simply vanished from the show's world. Brendan denied any wrongdoing, framing it as a misunderstanding. But the damage was already done. The fans noticed. They saw the missing faces and openly criticized the profound lack of closure. For Damian, it must have been a bittersweet saga, joining one of the UK's biggest comedies, yet perpetually living in the shadow of the actor who came before him. Taking over such a legendary role was never going to be easy, and though he gave it his absolute best, the character of Rory Brown never quite felt the same again. Each one of these departures, whether quiet, emotional, or engulfed in controversy, marked the end of a distinct era for Mrs. Brown's Boys. The laughter continues, but longtime fans can still feel the void left by the missing pieces that once made the show so uniquely special. What do you think? Did the series ever truly recover from these cast changes, or did it lose an essential piece of its original magic? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories like this one.